So to discuss this, I have in the studio someone who has been very passionate about school and learning, Dr. Ojon. He is an author, he is a social commentator, he's also a student leader and a politician. Let me add that one. That's good to see you. Good to see you. And good to have you in studio. After all the while, it's quite a long while. Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you so
much. Great
to
see you. Now we also have Hassan Taiwo joining us on Skype as well, on Zoom rather, to help us make sense. Hassan, good morning. Good to have you join me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. Now let's begin with you, Doctor. I know you've been following these developments across the country, especially in some of the states in the north where schools are being attacked and all of that. When we had the Chibok girls and then the others that followed and all of that, everyone was thinking, okay, that was the worst of it. As much as it was as bad. But we didn't think that it was going to happen again in other parts of the country, especially when government had said, okay, we have learned our lessons, we're going to ensure that schools are safe and all of that. What do you make of all of these?
I think the first thing we should understand is that any attack on school is not, it's a direct attack on education. And in a country where we've been hovering between 10, 13, going back and forth, number of children are out of school.
And 13 million?
Yeah, 13 million, that's the highest figure across the globe. So it calls for concern when you look at it from this angle. Because education, really, the first principle of education is access. At least everybody willing to get educated should have access to formal education. So when anything happens that actually directly or indirectly denies the people from getting access to education, then it should be a concern to everyone. So for me, it's a major concern. I've been working directly with students since 2008 with my student mentoring initiative. And you discover that first, school is not attractive to a lot of people in the northern part of the country, has not been made attractive. That's number one for a very long time. But it got to a point that government began many programs to make school attractive, and I think that is actually yielding result. But beyond that, the bandit and everybody involved in that dark business has actually understood the economy, the dark economy in kidnapping. So the first thing you think about is that you target soft spot. That's why majority of burglary that happens in our houses are done through the back door. So the soft targets are known as the back door. So now they are not just kidnapping to secure release of their members that are arrested by government. They have identified an economy around this act. And because everybody, it generates pity in the community, there's pressure on the government. Even if the government, the Kaduna state government said, oh, we are not going to pay ransom. But look at the pity around the community. Because the parents are not going to leave their wards and their children in kidnappers' den, and you say you are not going to do anything. Unfortunately, government does not have the capacity to secure all schools in Nigeria. Now let's do a bit of mathematics. In Nigeria today, there are about 371,800 police personnel in the entire police force. And in Lagos State alone, we have about 1,045 public primary schools. So within Lagos, how do they secure Lagos? Using the police figure. The police is the closest personnel to the people, believable personnel, because they are about the only security outfit that is close to the people that carry AK-47. The other people you see around don't have the ability, the license to do so. Yeah. So when you look at all this put together, Mike, the government does not have the capacity to actually secure our school at this point. So we are looking, perhaps as the program goes on, we'll continue to look at other alternatives.
All right, Hassan, let me bring Hassan in here. Now, Hassan, there is the argument as to when it comes to securing schools, whether we should have security agents on ground to secure schools. Because children are young and are coming up, growing up to see men with arms all over them because they have to be secured. Others will say psychologically it will be counterproductive eventually going up as they grow up. But how do we secure schools to ensure that students are in school and they are safe, and anyone who goes to school returns back home?
Well, thank you. I think it depends on the risk assessment. Where there is evidence of a threat to a school, obviously nobody can argue against putting in place, security men as well as equipment, to prevent such a threat from happening. But where a risk assessment does not indicate immediate threat, what I think needs to be done is to ensure that there are resources put on the ground, both within as well as outside the school, for purpose of gathering intelligence and ensuring that any subtle threat are nipped in the bud without necessarily having to roll out the tanks. That, for me, is how to address that kind of concern, because obviously it's a concern that we cannot just explain away, because we also do not want to convey to children the idea that they are learning under siege. But unfortunately, in some places in the Northeast, there's no way you are not going to have some physical presence of security personnel, given the enormous threats to school and to safety that exist in these places. But going away from that, because on this question of school safety and threat to school children, we've been talking about it for years. And oftentimes, when I intervene in this kind of discussion, what I always stress is the fact that the security approach has to be seen as a temporary effort to try and ward off immediate threats. But that the only way to ensure that security will be restored in our schools on a permanent basis is to look at the fundamental sources of this threat, of this insecurity, which, if you look very well, can be found in the way society is being run, in the social injustice that exists, and the crisis that exists in different parts of the country. Until some of these issues are resolved, there's no way we'll be able to end what has become a recurrent cycle of school kidnap, of insecurity and threats to the life and livelihood of Nigerians. Because the schools exist inside communities. So where those communities, are themselves insecure, there's no way the schools can be made secure, no matter how much resources you put on the ground. Because I remember particularly in 2017, when the school kidnap in Lagos State happened, we ran a campaign, my organization in coalition with others, ran a campaign called Safe School Initiative, trying to provide, proposals as to how government can address this. We were talking about perimeter fencing, we're talking about putting police on the ground, we're talking about marine security, we're talking about a whole lot of things. But all of these things can only work where the society where the schools themselves are located have a certain level of security. And as it is today, whether in the east or the south or in the north, the country is on the edge and on the precipice. And this has to be addressed in order for our schools and our children to be safe.
All right. Okay, thank you, Hassan. So let me come back to you. Now, the point there is, we see, in fact, with the recent development now, the government of Kebbi State is asking that schools should shut down. Yeah. And we're seeing several schools are shutting down in the state for safety and security reasons. We also know that, like you were saying earlier, the statistics show that about 13 million, and the numbers are growing, children are out of school. That figure is still there. And with the development now, there could likely be more, adding up to out-of-school children. In the long run, what do you think is the implication of all of this going forward?
The implication is that everything government does does well has a direct implication in the moral standard of this thing. Because the eye of everyone, government seems to be the biggest agent of socialization in the century. Because formerly, everything you derive, every of your moral principle, you derive it from the home. But now, averagely, because of the accessibility of information, everybody looks at the government. That, oh, are they behaving well in government? If they are not behaving well, maybe I shouldn't even behave well. Now, the implication of that is that either we like it or not, a lot of people may come out to condemn whatever the government has done by closing down the school. But that seems to be the immediate action that needs to be taken. That has to be taken. Mike, you can't be talking about peace in school in a community that is in crisis. You can't be talking about safety of children in school where you cannot protect the community. So first, whatever is happening in school today is an extension of the avoidable crisis in our community. So if we are talking about 13 million people, then it means that there will be explosion in that figure. What can government do differently? Maybe we should be looking at a way of COVID-19 has taught us a very great lesson, and there were governments that actually took steps in that direction. Now, solving insecurity may not be directly in the hand of any governor. They can complement, they can do, because the complaint has always been we do not have control over the security apparatus. I haven't seen that has changed, because I understand how government works now. Now, we need to, as a matter of urgency, take learning to people where they live. Because if we cannot gather them now, we should think about how we can actually reach out to them. And there were states that did this either politically or they did it very well. We have seen, for example, there was a time in Osun State, I don't know whether it's still functioning now, that they had a program called Okpoimo. Okpoimo is taking your school home in a tablet. Every subject you want is there. The guidance is there. Now we need to recruit the parent as the teacher. Now, recruiting the parent as a teacher not necessarily mean that we are paying them, but we must make them understand the implication of their children being out of school. And the need for them to guide, to continue to guide them to actually acquire education. But the reality of what we have on ground now is that the government may be too proud to accept the fact that they cannot tackle it in the immediate. They've not been building the capacity over the time. So this thing is very strange to them. They were not even thinking that some of these bandits, these terrorists will now leave kidnapping and go to school. They weren't thinking. That's why when this thing happened, everybody was caught unawares. So I think for the immediate now, we need to look at that direction as we continue to build our security capacity.
All right, Hassan, you mentioned the issue of the community where the school is located, which is very key. Dr. has also reiterated on that. If we have to look at that as a strategy, what kind of conversation and engagement should we be having with communities where schools are located? Because the point there is, if you want to deploy police to every school, I believe that is going to be almost impossible to have policemen or even soldiers or the DSS or civil defense in every school. But when it comes to what the community with traditional rulers and all of those can do, how much of that should we begin to look at as an alternative?
Well, let me first say that the fact that there cannot be enough police and security operatives to be deployed to our school itself is an indictment on this government. Not just this government, even the successive ones. Because the reality is that when you look at the way the police operate, we are going to realize that more than half of the police population who are not even enough, more than half of this is deployed doing VIP, doing protection, kind of protection for so-called VIPs and politically exposed persons. And I think that point needs to be stressed, that it's an indictment that at this stage you can still be talking of inadequacy of police. But then, be that as it may, I also think that one of the alternatives that can work is to put the security of schools as well as of the community in the hands of the community itself. And what that means is that in every community where schools are located, we need a situation whereby there can be creation of what I would call democratic defense committees, which will comprise the representatives of the teachers union, that is the NUT, the representative of the school, the representative, of course, of the Ministry of Education, as well as police and security agencies, as well as other key institutions within those communities. Because, for instance, there are some communities where you have CDA groups. There are some communities where you have functioning youth associations. You have artisan groups. Because ultimately, these are groups that know what happens within their community, that knows where threat can come from, and they know how to carry out intelligence
and how to checkmate exactly,
and how to checkmate it. Most often, when police complain that they do not receive intelligence, it's only because, given the anti-poor character of the government and the way police are used regularly to attack the oppressed people, including protesters, people have no confidence in them. So that's why sometimes they do not even receive intelligence when they need it. Meanwhile, there's no crime that happens in society.
All right, Hassan.
Somebody who knows somebody who is involved.
Yes. All right, Hassan. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time right now, but we really take the points that you're making because they are really cogent, and they are factual, and they are strong, and they are deep. And certainly these are narratives that government has to start looking at to change the narrative, because the point there is government cannot tackle all of these alone. There has to be a collaboration between government and the people for information and intelligence to be gathered and gotten and analyzed and executed. Thank you very much, Hassan Taiwo, for coming on the program. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Dr. John, thank you very much for coming as well.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. We hope to have more of you as well.
Of course, yeah.
Thank